Welcome along to episode 16 of the Lifting in Life podcast. I'm Cam, I'm the host. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology, I'm a personal trainer, and I also work in IT. On today's episode, I have the honour of Karlina Tongotea joining me. She's a powerlifter, but not only that, she holds a world record for the squat in the 76 kg weight class, and she's also heading to Sheffields and to the World Champs this year to represent New Zealand. In our chat, we focus a lot on the broader impact that competing at such a high level can have on the different areas of your life. As well as that, Karlina shares some really practical advice for those of you who are wanting to start powerlifting or even just start the gym or fitness in general. And then another important or interesting avenue that we went down is how Karlina uses the tool of mindfulness to cope with all the pressure and the different emotions that comes along with the level of competition that she is at. Now, as a disclaimer, this was my first time recording in the office by myself, and there are motion sensor lights. Now, I will edit the parts out where the lights turn off, but yeah, the lights turn off a couple of times because I obviously wasn't moving around enough. But there's a few times at the beginning where the lights cut out, so it might sound a little bit clunky to start off with. Anyway, I hope you do enjoy the episode. If you want to show support, obviously like or comment on the platform that you're listening on, and obviously feel free to subscribe as well. It all really helps, and I appreciate the support. But yeah, I hope you enjoy. Thanks. Knew that would happen.
Okay.
Anyway, episode 16. Where I feel very privileged to have you on today, Karlina. It's not often I get to talk to an athlete of your caliber, so I feel quite honoured to have you on today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed listening to your other guests. I'm happy to chat with you today.
Oh, cool. Thanks so much. I wasn't sure what I was going to get when I put it out on my Instagram, because I just put a post out on Insta saying, I want to be really consistent with the podcast this year. If you have any guests that you think I should get on, let me know. And then, someone recommended you. And then sure enough, we made it happen. We were booked in for the end of April as well, right?
Yeah, like ages away.
Yeah. And then someone couldn't make it. So it's worked out.
Sweet.
In
Cool.
terms of what I'm keen to chat about today, obviously strength training, powerlifting. It'd be weird if we talked about anything else.
Yeah.
But I'll be keen to dive into a few different things, why you chose strength training, what it means to you, and maybe the broader effects that it's had on your friends and family, you competing at such a high level. But we'll start off super easy, super basic. I know you're busy. You're also a doctor, do your powerlifting, competing at a national level and getting world records and stuff. So what does your day-to-day look like at the moment?
Yeah. I guess it's a pretty easy answer because 4 days a week I'm a GP in a semi-rural clinic in Waiuku. And then the other days of the week I'm an athlete. So there's a pretty there's a war between the two people. And on my GP days, I just don't have the time or energy to be an athlete. So I don't put much effort into it. But I have a day off one day and I finish early another day to just flick back into my athlete mode and just train and focus on all of that stuff. So I've been lucky enough to find there's some kind of balance between the two where I just keep them completely separate.
Well, that's impressive, because my partner Chloe, she's an IFBB bikini athlete, and she went to a sports psychologist once. And the sports psychologist described life as like a pie. And when you're a professional athlete or competing at a really high level, the majority of that pie is taken up by your competing, whether that's training or prepping or actually competing. Whereas it sounds like you've got a much more even split between those two different worlds.
Yeah, it feels that way. And when I'm, like I said, when I'm in one of the worlds, I'm 100% in that world. And then the other day, I'm just not. And I don't think many people are lucky enough to do that. I think there's some things that have changed along my journey in powerlifting that's allowed me to do that. I think one big thing is moving up weight classes and not having cutting and dieting really hard be a part of that process. That's given me a lot of freedom mentally and physically.
I was about to say mentally as well, because dieting hard can zap your energy, and especially mentally too, right?
Totally.
So you're training, are you still training on the days that you are working?
No. So on those days, I just don't train at all. I work really far from my gym, and I don't really have a home set up. So I have Tuesdays off and finish early on Thursdays, and those are my powerlifting days, and the weekend, of course. Yeah. So they really are very separate things, separate people.
And I know you're building up to Sheffield at the moment. I'll be honest, I don't know heaps of stuff about powerlifting, but since having you on, I started looking into it. I obviously know what squats, deads and bench and stuff is, but in terms of the competing element of it, and man, that's a huge show, or a huge competition, sorry. And with only training a few days a week, what does your training split look like to build up to such a big competition at the moment?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's the first competition of its kind, and it's our first meet where we can earn money as athletes. So
nice.
It's really exciting for the sport itself. It's really this company SBD is trying to open the doors to making powerlifting a professional sport, which is amazing for us. So very excited about it. But training split wise, I do train for a long time. So I 4 hours easily a time.
4 hours.
Yeah, I mean it's powerlifting, so there's a lot of there's a lot of rest. Yeah. It is my social life, so there's talking as well. But so I'll train 4 days a week, and one of those is a bench only, so it's very easy and quick, and I just do it at home. I do that today after this. But my main days is like a big squat and a bench session with accessories, and then the next day will be bench and deadlift, and then the third day will be all three at varying intensities and loads and variations, just to keep it interesting, because it is just 3 movements.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. And what do your accessory movements look like? Because obviously you've got your 3 big compound lifts, but there's many different muscle groups that need to be strong in order to perform those at a high level. So what are some of the accessories that you add in at the moment? Yeah,
so my coach programs everything for me, and I never stray too far, except for my stretching and getting ready. I know what I need for that. But accessory wise, lots of core in terms of weighted planks and leg raises, and then there'll be quite heavy dumbbell bench press incline or laying flat, lots of back extensions, and it changes every day, every week. But there's my coach focuses a lot on them. So I'll have, after my big lifts, main lifts, I'll have anywhere between 4 to 6 sets of accessories, or types of accessories.
Yeah, and that's how a session can take so long too.
Yes. You're I'm done, and then you're oh my god, I've got 4 accessories.
Oh man, yeah. I don't know if you know him, but he's the hypertrophy coach. He's a really big bodybuilding coach. But anyway, he has an app, and I decided to sign up to it so then I don't have to do my own programming. Cool. And some of my sessions could be an hour, or pushing an hour and a half. Yeah. And I'm getting to the point where I'm oh man, this is taking so long. Yeah. So imagine spending a few hours in the gym. Yeah.
So yeah, definitely when you first start, you skip them a lot, because you're sort of I've been here for 2 hours. Why am I going to keep doing this? But I've learned a lot that they're pretty integral, and if you skip them, you'll learn.
I listened to one of your most recent podcast episodes that you're on, which I thought it would be good to get clued up on where you're at and how long you've been in this sport. And I was surprised that you haven't actually been powerlifting for all that long. Was it since 2018? Is that right?
Yeah. That was my first competition. I think I competed a lot. And so I got a lot of experience and in the first few years. So it could almost like be 2 or 3 years condensed in the one, to be honest, because we just compete lots. We do it often. And I haven't really had a break since I first started. I've just been super consistent. And so, it feels like longer.
And I'd be keen to sort of understand more about your choice of powerlifting and why you chose that modality of training, I suppose, because there's obviously so many different types of training you could do. You could be an endurance athlete doing ultra marathons or something, could be bodybuilding, could be in a team sport. So what were the decisions behind pursuing powerlifting? Was it a big decision, or was it you just kind of fell into it? Or
in a way, just fell into it, but it was like a series of events that led me to it, because I played netball like up until I started working as a junior doctor. So my whole life, really, obviously a team sport, and you need to be at team trainings and games. And so as soon as I started working in the hospital, that just became a non-possible thing for me to do and commit to. And that's when I first started like really going to the gym and stuck in the like little woman's corner of the gym, because I was just like, I don't know what to do.
So you hadn't done weight training or been to a gym really before?
No weight training or gym training. And they had like a sort of program or 8-week challenge going. So I thought, I'll do this because I have no clue what I'm doing. And there was a PT there who did like some squats and deadlifts, and I started seeing females doing it in New Zealand, like on Instagram, and I was sort of like, okay, that looks really cool. They were jacked, so I was like, okay, surely if I do this, I'm going to look like that. So I asked this PT, like, can you show me how to do these 3 things? And then when we first started, like my first day, we were testing and I squatted 100 kilos, and I didn't know what that meant.
What? That's insane, man.
I was just like, cool.
Wow.
This is fun.
That's unreal.
Yeah. And my PT was looking at me like, do you understand?
Well, like, you've definitely done this before. Is this a joke?
Yeah. And I stayed with him for like a couple of months, just learning how to squat and sometimes bench and deadlift. And then I quickly found my coach, to be honest. I was watching his athletes and like comparing myself to them with form and everything like that, and depth. And so I think I always knew I wanted to go and get coached by him. Mm-hmm. And that happened really quickly anyway. So that once I went to that gym, I have never left.
Wow, that's so cool. And for context, for people who don't gym or haven't tried squatting before, if I had a client and it was their first time squatting, we might go up to 40 kgs, maybe, if their technique was looking good. So for your technique, obviously, I assuming must have been good, and then to also be able to keep pushing through to go to 100 kgs. I feel like I'd be getting filmed and it's a joke or something.
Yeah, I just didn't even register what that meant, but I quickly got used to being like the strong girl at the gym. And I really liked that feeling.
No.
But yeah.
I knew this was going to happen. That's because I'm not moving around enough. I think there's no one in the
room.
Meeting room. Anyway, yeah, so you quickly found your coach.
Yeah, and then all of that being the strong girl at the gym went away. And I was like, whoa, people are way stronger.
Yeah. It's actually an interesting point that you bring up in terms of there's a clear difference in your confidence levels when you first went into the gym, hiding away in the women's area, not too sure what to do, and then you found your niche, realised that you were very capable, more than very capable at doing it, and then you felt a lot more, by the sounds of it, empowered and encouraged to go to the gym. Would you say that's a good piece of advice for people wanting to start at the gym? Obviously, they're not probably going to be able to squat 100 kgs, but in terms of finding your thing in the gym and feeling confident, would you say that's something that's really important for beginners?
Yeah, totally. And just, ask the PTs or the staff at the gym, do more than you feel comfortable with, like move out of your little corner and try some things out, and you'll find something that you enjoy. Yeah, that's so cool, man. And then obviously after you've started with the coach should have quickly recognised your talent and your ability, and then so were you put on to quite an intense training block to start off with, or what did that initial coaching phase look like? Yeah, well, going from like PT sessions where it's either 30 minutes or 1 hour.
I might have to move somewhere else. Anyway, okay. So when you started with your coach in that initial training phase, obviously from not having been with a coach before to then starting with a coach, what did that initial training phase look like? Yeah,
it quickly turned to 2-hour trainings, which I was like, why am I doing this? Why am I here at the gym for 2 hours? And it would have felt intense at the time for sure. I tried to do, because where I live, the gym is half an hour away in town.
Yeah.
And so I tried to do it at a local gym, but I just, with being so new with the movements, I was like, I'm sure I'm missing some stuff here. So I started traveling into the gym, and I've never stopped because I get to have his real-time input.
So do you see him in person?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's really worth it.
Oh, yeah. Totally. And we have a club. So I've got training partners and we're all at, different levels, and there's teenage girls that are starting to lift, and it's so awesome to be around them while I'm doing my session. But yeah, he's there and to help us all pretty much. Yeah. It's pretty invaluable.
Yeah, and I know that beginning phase with a coach can be so different to when you're even just doing stuff with a PT, or especially if you're just doing stuff by yourself. So was it quite a big shock or a big wake-up call to be then working with someone in person who is really pushing your strength and taking you to another level to what you had been at before?
Yeah, I think I just really liked it. Before powerlifting, like my parents were my coaches in netball, and they were pretty hardcore. And it sort of created this, like, I don't know, sadistic love for being pushed. Yeah. And I really enjoyed that type of training, like being pushed to my limits, and tough love, because they were my parents. They're sort of like, you're not our daughter at training.
I feel like parents are almost more harsh on their kids if they're some sort of coach to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's probably this fear of not wanting to look like they're biasing or giving you any special attention, so they push it to the other end of the spectrum. End.
Yeah, they're like, I don't know you, but I'm going to push you way harder than anybody else.
I feel like that element of really wanting to work hard and push and take things to another level is probably something that you obviously need to have, but something that connects athletes that are competing at a top level, no matter what the sport. Is that something you've found at different competitions or people you've interacted with?
Yeah, and even with like my own training partners, when I first started, I started like somehow at the same time as one of my friends called Jewel, and we have the very similar mentality, and we've trained together and gotten to this high level together. And our coach is also like you could say tough love, just like without the love kind of kind of coaching.
Just tough. Yeah.
And we respond pretty well to that kind of training. Not a lot of people do, because there's quite a few powerlifting gyms, and we're quite different in that way, but I just seem to sort of thrive in that way, where almost if he's getting like saying nice things, I'm sort of like, what's wrong? Why?
This can't be good.
Yeah, don't say that, then I'm gonna suck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it's healthy or not, but it works for me.
Yeah. Oh man. So that it sounds like you applied a similar mindset from. To me, it sounds like you've always sort of had this mindset to a certain degree, but it seems like it was able to transfer over from previous sports, and that is something that you see a lot with top athletes, is that they've sort of always had this kind of mindset, but then it's just applied to different avenues or different pursuits. And another thing I'd be interested, which is sort of similar, but stepping into your other area of life, is that mindset that you have for willing to work hard, willing to push. Is that something that also helped you during your studies? Because what's your official title?
So I'm a general practitioner, so family doctor. Yeah.
Yeah. And so is that something that was applied to your studies for that? Because I can't imagine you doing those academic studies. It wouldn't have been easy. I mean, I did my degree in psychology, and that was hard enough, let alone something in the medical kind of field. So
yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. It's really just like head down, get it done. That's for me. Of course, there are a lot of tears and stress and worrying about things, but then it's easy for me to just move on. It's like get the feeling out and move on, because it's not helpful. Just sit in it. So yeah, and even just like working in South Auckland and working at Middlemore Hospital, that creates some pretty tough people when you come out the other end. So I think just lots of different things. My netball, my parents, where I've worked and grew up in, it's a very good environment for creating a resilient people.
Nice. It's really well articulated. And what I find interesting about people like yourself and other people who compete at a top level or have this willingness to push hard and to, you acknowledge there that those feelings of wanting to give up aren't helpful, so you move on. It seems as if you're almost kind of born with it. This willingness to push through. Is it something that you would say that you're born with, or would you say that it's more something that was crafted, the nature versus nurture? Yeah.
I do think it's a bit of both, because I have thought about it a lot. When you get older and you think, I do think I'm one of 5, and we're all different. And I'm just when I first joined powerlifting, my coach gave me this award, and it was poise. And it was just like, that's just you. Like, whatever comes your way, you're just like, okay, whatever, good or bad.
Very composed.
Yeah. And I've always been like that as a kid. And I don't know that I was taught that, because I'm different in that way to my siblings. We all had the same upbringing. So I think there must be something like just the right or just a certain temperament that you're born with, and that gets nurtured into something, which for me just went like an extreme way of working hard.
But then there's also the second step to that is the ability to channel it into something too, right? And channeling it into something positive, like your powerlifting. And in terms of pulling it back to the powerlifting side of things, what do you think the term strength means to you? Because obviously you're trying to get as physically strong as you possibly can, but do you think there's something more to it? What are the places that you go to in that strength training in order to achieve the things that you've achieved?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And you mentioned one of the main words before, which was like empowerment. And I think for anybody at any level, strength training is empowering, no matter what it is, whether it's body weight squat and whether it's the 200 kilo squat. You're going to feel empowered if you're doing it and you're seeing that little bit of progress in any kind of way, whether it's how you feel less sore the next time you do it. That's progress. That's empowering. And I think in a way, like my job helps me remember that, because when I'm at the gym and I'm hitting what I'm hitting, I'm feeling very strong. And then when I go to work, I've got an 80-year-old patient who is telling me she's going to the gym and like lifting 1 kilo dumbbells. And I'm way more happy for that than I was for the training I just hit. So I love that my job lets me see that side of strength training, because I get so excited when I see it, and I'm so happy to see it. So yeah, I think strength is for everybody, and it's totally relative, and it's fine to look at other people for inspiration, but it's yourself and the small progresses you make that are important.
It's you versus you.
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
That's such a cool idea that you're getting at there, and I look at it sort of from a macro perspective. The big thing is I'm just wanting to get strong, or I'm wanting to get fitter. But then the micro thing is, okay, last time I did bodyweight squat for 10. This time I'm going to get a 6 kg kettlebell and see if I can get 10 reps. And then so over time, if you apply that progressive overload, you're going to get stronger. But then I think it's so important that what you're getting at there, each session also improving. And it feels so empowering. And I feel the same when I'm personal training. I've recently started doing just some free sessions in my office at
cool.
work, and just being able to teach people how to do a squat. Like it could just be a box squat, squat down, touch the box, and then stand back up, and then seeing them progress each set. There's this, I guess it would be empowering, but it just makes me feel really, really happy to be able to pass that knowledge on to someone. So someone who's 80 telling you that they're starting training, man, that like almost gives me goosebumps.
Honestly, I love it when I see her. I'm like, what are you doing at the gym today? It's so exciting. But like you said, just teaching somebody a box squat, that's going to be extremely important functionally when they get older. These things are important throughout your whole entire life. And I think strength, knowing the medical side and how it strengthens bones and keeps you healthy and mentally healthy, all of those things are just outside of myself are amazing about strength.
Yeah, I was having the exact same conversation with someone the other day. He was saying, I know that as you get older, you just, you lose all your muscle and you can't gain any more strength. And I said, I beg to differ. I would like to disagree with that, especially if you're currently not training. And the way I described it to him is that if you're not giving your body a reason to hang on to this muscle, to hang on to this bone density, it's not going to waste its energy in trying to hold on to it. But if you're pushing that ability, you're putting it under some kind of loading safely, then it's it could even put on muscle and build your bone density, but it's at least going to sustain what you have right now.
Oh, totally. And, as the orthopedic surgeons love to say, is like, if you don't use it, you lose it. So
as cliche as it sounds, that's precisely it.
Cliche, but it's true.
And I do like how from that question you went straight to how it empowers other people. But if I can pull it back to you specifically, that shows how humble you are. Right? but if I can pull it back to you specifically, what are some of the key things that you've learnt that go beyond just lifting weights? The key things that you've learned throughout this journey with strength training? Yeah,
I think there's quite a few different things. The main thing is just like consistency with anything that you do, because even though 5 years in the scheme of where I've ended up seems short, those things took a lot of time. It took hundreds and thousands of reps of the same motion, and just putting the work in and being patient and waiting for things, and using that time to learn about your body and what it's telling you. It's taken me 5 years to really understand that. Like, I feel like I'm only just at a point now where I can truly listen to my body and what it's telling me and adjust. And that's all come through just continuing, just being super consistent. Aside from that, I've learned a lot about, especially with this year, like learning to be comfortable growing into the body that strength training gives you.
Yeah.
That's been quite a big one for me. I started off in an under 64 kilo weight class, and so now I'm in an under 76 kilo weight class, and so that's a 3 weight class. Yeah, 3 weight classes. And it's, I think, like other sports, when there's a weight, then there's this like culture of cutting and
stigma
being
attached to it.
And especially in powerlifting, when you first join, like it's quite strong that, okay, obviously you're going to cut to a weight class, but that's not obvious. It's not really
that's
what
something that I've never really understood, because it's the same in like fighting sports too, where I just couldn't understand, say, for you as an example, if your body weight was always sort of 82 kgs and then, I've got a competition coming up where I need to perform at the best of my ability, but I'm also going to be in a calorie deficit and cut down. I feel like the strategy that you're taking on, where you hover around that same... Right. I wonder... What was the last thing that we were chatting about there?
Weight cutting.
Oh, yeah, weight cutting. All right, another technical mishap. So this is the first time I've tried to do it in the office by myself, and the motion sensor, I'm just not moving around enough to keep it on. So that's okay. Here we are. So we were chatting about cutting down to weight classes, and I was saying how that's not something I've ever been able to understand, when you're going to push so hard into a calorie deficit to drop 5 to even 10 kgs and then want your body to perform at its most optimal ability. Yeah. So what's your views on that strategy? Because you kind of hover around your weight class, is that right?
Yeah, definitely now I do, like within 1 to 2 kilos. And then as I get closer, 1 kilo, and then I'll just weight cut, just spend a day eating chocolate and weight cut, which is pretty fun to me. Yeah. One day's enough, not more than that. I agree. Like I don't understand, especially for a lot of new people, because powerlifting, there's only a very small percentage that's at the top, and there's thousands and thousands of people that are doing this just to compete because they love to compete. So at that level, I don't understand it. And having been through it and felt what it's like to be in that deficit, but lift heavy weights, when you're in it, you think it's normal, and everybody around you is doing it. Everybody's feeling the same. So you can convince yourself that this is fine, this is normal, we're all doing it together. But after my first couple of times, that's when I just started filling out weight classes. But it took a while to see that this culture is not quite right, and I don't want to be a part of it. And the difference between not cutting is massive. Like it takes a huge mental stress, physical stress off your body, and you're able to compete really to the best of your ability.
It almost seems like with powerlifting, you should almost build up to your weight class. Start at 72 to then bulk up during your prep to compete at 76. And that's going to naturally happen anyway, because you don't have all that muscle when you start. You build muscle and you get bigger, and you really grow into the weight classes. But a lot of people hang on as hard as they can. Yeah, and from my experience, I did a couple of bodybuilding shows a few years ago, and so I've been in the bodybuilding space for a while. When you're prepping for a bodybuilding show, it's just a given that you're going to lose strength. And obviously, when you compete at a powerlifting show, you're not trying to be 5% or below body fat. So it's not exactly comparative, but it's almost a given that you're going to lose some strength because you're pushing so hard into that calorie deficit. And if you're having to lose 5 or 6 kgs or even more for a show, to me, it would almost seem a given that you're most likely going to lose strength depending on how you did that weight cut. But you're trying to do the opposite, which is to get stronger for your show.
Exactly. Yeah. You want to be the strongest that you've ever been on that day that you've maybe, for some people, spent a week water loading, eating very minimal calories, and then having 2 hours to refeed and get on the platform.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. It seems
It
kind
just
of crazy to
doesn't
me.
make sense. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of top level lifters do it, and they're amazing, and they're at the top.
Yeah.
So they've figured out a way to deal with it. But I just think for the majority of people, it's not fun, and it's just a part of the process that is not enjoyable. So don't do it.
Yeah, wouldn't recommend.
Wouldn't recommend.
In terms of the learnings from your powerlifting from a macro view, what about the learnings from the massive achievements you've, for the want of a better word, achieved? Like when you've won competitions or when you've got your world record, how did that make you feel at the time? Did you ever get sort of imposter syndrome, or because only from the brief time that I've been chatting to you, it's obvious that you're super humble. So I'd be interested to understand what it was like for you to achieve such big things and in such a short period of time too. But.
Yeah. I've been thinking about it, thinking about imposter syndrome, because I know that soon I'm new to the people I'm going to compete against. This competition is not new to me, but they're all stars, basically. They're all pretty famous people in the powerlifting world. And I've been sort of thinking about how am I going to feel when I'm in the same room as them. At the moment, I just know, keeping it to the facts, I know what I've done and I know what it means and I know what I'm capable of. So for the time being, while I'm safe in New Zealand and not surrounded by all of that energy, I'm just choosing to stay steadfast in the fact that I know that I've done what I have done, and that's from my work and what I worked towards. So I haven't had any hints of imposter syndrome yet, but I'm just trying to be aware of it and maybe learn some tools to deal with it when I get there. Yeah,
that's probably one reassuring element about powerlifting, is it's so objective. I have squatted 220 kgs versus a sport that's subjective like bodybuilding. I won a show in New Zealand, but how does that mean against people overseas? So you know what numbers you've hit, so you can, like you said, refer back to them and understand your capabilities going into such a big competition.
Yeah, totally. In that way it's very easy. There's a lot of talk about this competition, and obviously some of it is that I have never been in a room with these people, so how am I going to deal with that pressure when I don't know what it feels like? And I just think that, I've come from places where a lot more is on the line, and so I'm trying to pull from that, from my work, that actually in the bigger scheme of things, this is not that much pressure. And even though I might not feel like it, I can use that kind of stuff that I've learned at work, when, it's literally lives and people's livelihoods, and use that when I get there. That's sort of how I'm thinking about things. Yeah,
it's almost putting it into perspective, not to take away from the significance, but you're not going to die in that setting.
This can only be good for me, really. So I'm just going to embrace it.
Do you think you would consider seeing someone like a sports psychologist or chatting to other high-level athletes prior to going to this competition to get their knowledge or understanding of what it's like to be competing at such a high level?
I have thought of it sometimes. There's quite a few of the athletes that are competing do work with the sports psychologist and really rave about how helpful it has been, even when they've started seeing them after they've been champions. So they've still got stuff to learn and gain from them. So I have started thinking about it. I think I might wait till after this competition, maybe to explore it a bit more. But for the time being, I'm sort of just reading things and watching some athletes. Like currently there's Alex Volkanovski who's fighting today, and sort of just been like, he's been not similar, but just in a way where he seemed to come out of nowhere, and people continuously think, you know, can he really do it? Even though he proves himself over and over
every
again.
Time.
Yes. So yeah, I'm like, that would be such a cool brain to pick about how he deals with that. And even sort of like physically, he's a smaller guy. So that would be, I'm a midget. So when I get there, I'm going to be like that too. So
underestimated.
Yeah. So, but there's strength in that too, being underestimated.
100%. And I feel like a silver lining or a optimistic view of you going to a competition like this and not having been to a competition like this, it means that there aren't any expectations of you. You don't have thousands of people thinking, well, she's definitely going to win, so you're not having to deal with that pressure of a high expectation versus, so you just get to go in and have fun. I feel like you could definitely win it too, which is even better. But going in and just testing the waters and seeing what happens, you don't have this huge number of people thinking that you're going to do really well and focusing on you really hard. You see it when people seem to, like you say, come out of nowhere, win something massive, and then they bomb it the next year because there's all this now pressure of having to achieve something.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be an interesting experiment to see how I go mentally when I get there.
Sorry, I'm just going to pause for a second. Apparently, my power adapter isn't plugged in. Oh no, okay, that's working. That would have been catastrophic if my laptop went flat. It's so good on a Mac how it gives you the warning.
Oh, good.
Another element of your journey that I would be interested to learn more about is how your competing at such a high level has impacted on your close circle, on your family and friends. You've got a family of five of you kids, so that's a lot in itself. But how has that impacted the loved ones and the close circle around you?
Yeah, I think I'm really lucky that they just get it. They know what I'm like and what I get like when I put my mind to something, and they just get out of the way. Okay.
Yeah. I'm just gonna sit down or you do your stuff.
No, but I'm like with my family, my partner, and my friends. You know, it's a pretty small circle, and I think it is because they're the ones that understand what it means to me and what it takes. It is I think if you get to a high level of anything, it's pretty. You need to be a little bit selfish with your time and energy, and I think I certainly am when it comes to this. But yeah, I just somehow my partner's just totally supportive, understands, gets it. It's not even an issue, and I'm very, very lucky in that way. And when he was training quite a bit, I'm the same way too. You know, I understand it. We get it. This is training, and this is important to both of us. So we're not going to step in the way of each other getting our gains.
Yeah. I was going to ask that because it's the same with Chloe and I. Like, she's obviously competes at a high level. I also train. I've competed before, so he obviously trains and has competed as well in powerlifting too. Or
he's mostly into kickboxing and MMA. So he those gyms are quite far away, and so there was a time where he was spending just as much time away as I was, and that's fine. We just make it work. It was like to go back to the weight cutting. That's when it was really hard, because one, I'm super hangry and upset that people are eating around me. I'm not a nice person to be around. And saying no to things because you're in such a deficit that you couldn't even really handle being around people at a cafe and just take your muesli or whatever. So it was a lot harder at the beginning, but growing into my weight class, accepting that, now it's a lot better. I still have to take my own meals when I'm deep into comp prep, but at least my brain isn't starved and I can be a nice person.
And in terms of your events, do your family and your friends come to watch you compete?
My gosh, every time if they can, and they'll drive as far as they have to, and we're a Tongan Māori family, so there's lots of us, and there's always heaps when it's just like my siblings. They're so cute. Like literally from day one, they were at my first ever competition, and one of my sisters made T-shirts.
That's so cool.
I was like, whoa, it's just my first comp.
Also sort of embarrassing at the same time.
I was like, I love you, but oh no.
But still,
Gosh.
I was going to say, with my experience of having nieces and nephews, they not always, but they're really keen to sort of be interested in what you're interested in or do things that you do. So have you noticed that you doing powerlifting has been an enabler to any of your friends or family to also start going to the gym or maybe even doing powerlifting?
I think, well, my nephew, he's just turned 4, and anytime he would see a dumbbell or little kettlebell, he's trying to pick it up, and he's like, I'm like Auntie Kina, he's so cute. And so already for him, and when you get this 3-year-old who's trying to show you his biceps, you're sort of like, okay.
It's so cute, eh?
So cute. And so yes, I have betrothed him to my coach. He's got first dibs
on an intense training block already,
as soon as possible. So at that small level, yes. And some of my friends have come and go from my gym. I have a childhood friend who's at my gym at the moment. So I think they've all, not all, but some of them have decided to start lifting, or and my family have just started to start exercising, which is really cool.
And that's something that, bringing it back to the word empower, but that's so empowering about you having the courage and ability to start on your own fitness journey, whatever that may be. One aspect of that you often don't know or acknowledge is that you can impact those around you. If you have the willingness to start doing something that's a little bit out of the comfort zone, a little bit difficult, so often it can have an impact, even indirectly, on the close ones around you.
Definitely.
And that's something that I would encourage people, but also clients, if, especially as parents or ones who, you got nieces and nephews and you can be a role model too. You could be the person that starts them on their fitness journey. For me, my older brother, he's 10 or 11 years older than me. He was going to the gym, and I was the same. When I was 4, I remember him buying me a 1 kg dumbbell, for my birthday. Now my niece, she's turning 14 this month. She's been going to a CrossFit gym for a year or 2 now.
So cool.
And then my nephew is the same. If he sees a dumbbell, oh, look at this, trying to pick it up. So that's something that I find really encouraging about pursuing some kind of fitness journey.
Yeah, definitely. And to speak to your niece who's 14, this last year we've started getting 15, 16-year-old girls come from the college that's not too far from our gym. And when they come, they're, obviously shy and haven't done any of this type of stuff before. And some of them are ollie lifting, some of them are powerlifting, but their friends see, and then another friend comes, and another friend comes, and it's just so cool to see, because I was not even thinking about strength as a 15, 16-year-old, and to see it becoming more of a thing is pretty awesome.
Yeah, and when I think about someone like my niece going to a gym, it makes me think about the people that she's around versus what, as a young teenager, you can be influenced so easily, and you could easily get into a more negative path. But whereas I see somewhere like the gym, people are there to get better. People are there to want to improve and to be in a positive space. So outside of the gym too, I feel like it's something that can really guide kids down a more positive way when you never know what another direction they could have chosen.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think sport, it teaches you a lot, but it keeps you busy too.
Yeah.
So
yeah. You don't have much time.
You don't have time to do much else.
Yeah. She's like also working at an ice cream parlor, and then obviously going to school, and then going to the gym, and it teaches you a lot of discipline and just knowing what you can achieve from sticking to something for a long period of time. It's like that consistency that you talked about.
Yeah.
If I turn up 3 or 4 days a week, that might not be much in itself, but if I do it for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden it's been 6 months to a year, you can achieve a lot.
Totally.
And that's like what you study as well. If I study for 1 hour a day, that's not much in itself. But if I do that 4 or 5 days a week over a long period of time, you can achieve some big results.
Yeah. It's that long-term game thinking.
Yeah. Sounds about right.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, what you said.
Yeah. No, to pull it back to more sort of basic, tangible stuff, I'd be keen to get your thoughts on, say, a hypothetical situation. If I was a beginner and I was wanting to get into powerlifting, what are some of the key things that I should do straight off the bat?
I think like one of potentially the easiest things you could do is approach a PT at your gym and just ask them about those movements, the basic movements. And I think that's a good way to just dip your toes into whether you enjoy doing that, but not having to commit to like a coach and a program and hours of whatever. So I think that's probably the most accessible way to do it. If you had a home gym, you could also give it a go at home and see how you go. But I think that's probably the best way to do it. If you're pretty set on it, then of course, like approach a coach. They all take on newbies, like clients who haven't done it ever before, and it's their job to be able to teach you from square zero. So I think either of those two things you can do, and it's really just about just do it. Just take that first step. That's the hardest one. The first step is the hardest. Just deciding that you're going to put yourself out there to give this thing a go.
Yeah, and that probably answers the question I also wanted to ask, is that so often I've heard people say, I'm not fit enough to get a PT, or I don't know enough, or I'm not strong enough to get a PT. So what would you say to people like that? Because obviously you're someone who easily squats and deads and maybe even benches more than me. So someone who's just starting out and thinks like, well, I'm not strong enough to do powerlifting. What would you say?
Yeah, I would just say, just do it. Just approach somebody and just get started. You may find that you'll never feel like you're strong enough. People join the gym and then they sit on their programs thinking they're not strong enough to do their first competition. But to be honest, I think like once you join, just compete in the next competition there is, because it's really just about getting your toes wet and getting that exposure, because the longer you sit on it, the less likely you are to go through with it. You spend more time convincing yourself you're not ready. Yeah,
precisely. And I feel like it comes back to that, what we were chatting about earlier, when it's you versus you. Your first competition, it's likely you're not going to win it. But if you go into it with the mindset of, I'm going to use this competition as a baseline, You know, what can I do in a competition so I have some baseline measures to improve on for my next competition? Because not that I've done a powerlifting comp, but I think it's pretty obvious that you deadlifting and squatting in the gym is very different to you deadlifting and squatting in competition.
Yeah, and that's the other side of the sport is practicing competition.
Yeah.
So it's not like a netball or rugby where you can compete every single weekend. You get a lot of practice, you learn a lot from that. So you need to compete as soon as possible, as much as possible, really just to practice being on that platform in front of people on a stage, rules and everything. And it really just shouldn't be about like, am I going to win? It's just get that exposure and just get all that learning and soak it all up.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And what about, I just had a thought in terms of stretching and mobility stuff. Is that something that you place a lot of focus on? And I was just thinking from a beginner's perspective, something that could potentially be beneficial is to work on just doing a body weight squat prior to even you wanting to sign up to a gym. So is that something that you place a lot of emphasis on?
I think particularly for a bodyweight squat, it took me ages to even bodyweight squat to depth. And so for some things like that, I personally don't think it's that important. You get enough weight on your back, you're going to sink.
It's going to push you down.
It's going to push you down.
Yeah.
And for me, for like a few years, that was the case. I think probably at the beginning, that's where you learn what type of mobility you need. And so again, it's sort of like, don't wait till you're mobile, just get in it, see how your shoulders are, how your hips are, and then work on those mobility things. And you can start tailoring them to you. It has been really important for me because I don't have much mobility. So I've been working on it over the years and finally got into a good place with that. But I think it's like a constant struggle because when you're constantly lifting heavy weights and exposing your body to that stimulus, you get really tight and you're just like fighting against, it's just this battle between, if I'm tight, that kind of helps me. But then it kind of also hurts.
Yeah. It's almost like a two-way street. How do you find the medium between the two?
Yeah.
And in terms of your goals and stuff, obviously you've got Sheffields coming up. But what are some of the goals that you have right now? Micro goals maybe, but also long-term bigger goals. What are some of the things that you're really focusing on and wanting to achieve?
The immediate goals is like world champs. I haven't gotten to a world champs yet, and so this year will be my first chance to get that world champ title. And so that's just a massive focus for this year. And I think just that's in June. So thinking about that and sort of doing all of that, the little things and the with training will help me with Sheffields because it's on the way.
From what I understand, is what's the higher caliber of competition though? Because it sounds like Sheffields is potentially even bigger than world champs.
In a way, it is, but you just don't get that title. It's basically world champions versus world champions, and there's been a set of wild card spots, which is how I'm going. And without the title, but the way you win is by breaking a world record by the highest percentage. So everybody's going, and that's how you win.
That is cool.
So it is, it's the best versus the best, and the only way you can win is to literally be the best.
Oh wow, that's exciting. Which is obviously different to the format of how world champs would work. I guess it's whoever produces the biggest total at world champs.
And at world champs, it's often not a world record because, there's a whole lot of other things that go into world champs, and you're just sort of like, what can I do on the day to get what I need to get first place? And that means way more competition as well because, the weight classes will just be bigger. Whereas Sheffield, it's not really weight class based. although there will be 3 of us in my weight class.
Yeah. So it's a different setup. So
Yeah.
the immediate goals, world champs, and obviously Sheffields as well. What about beyond that from a big perspective? If you just looked at your sport of powerlifting, what would be some of the biggest things? I feel like you've already ticked off one big one in terms of getting a world record, and then the next one being the world champs. What would be beyond that? Is it to sustain being able to do that consecutively, or is there other things involved too?
I think it's a really interesting time for the sport because it's potentially becoming more professional, and so we'll see what comes out of this competition and who else wants to take on that challenge of, making it something that people can make a career out of, because there may be like 10 people who have made a career out of this. Oh, wow. And it's mostly because, maybe they're a coach or they've got a massive following. And so, there's only a handful of people who have done that. Everybody else is got, full-time jobs and lives to sustain. Yeah. So I think that will be really interesting to see how it goes, coming in, getting, sponsorship and more exposure. It'll be, I'm interested or excited to see how that goes, how working with these new sponsors goes, and what kind of opportunities that brings. I never want to stop being a doctor, so that's always going to be a part of my life. Yeah. But whether that half split looks different in the next coming year or two is something that I'm thinking about.
Yeah, and that would be an interesting dynamic to, I don't know if you can, what right or correct looks like, but to have it at a balance where you're able to continue improving in your powerlifting without your work detracting from it, but then not have your powerlifting overcome your ability to work as well. Yeah.
Because I love my job and it's really a part of who I am. So I don't think I want to 100% just do athlete things. Yeah. It's a huge part of my life, and I really enjoy it.
Yeah. And an interesting predicament for professional athletes is that there's going to be a day when the competing eventually has to stop and will come to an end.
Yeah.
So being able to still have a whole nother area of your life that brings you meaning, and your whole identity isn't just the powerlifter, I feel like that would make that transition a lot easier as well.
Yeah, definitely. That's always going to be there in the background.
Yeah. Would you ever consider doing any kind of coaching?
I just no. It's such an easy answer for me. Yeah, that's quite a natural progression for a lot of powerlifters, whether you're high level or not. Yeah. A lot of people get into coaching. I'm a different athlete in that I just want to do the work. I don't want to coach.
I felt like the answer would be no, given your you being a doctor as well. So then to also slot in coaching there. I don't know how that would work. Yeah,
but I think mentally, or what sort of gets me going, it's not really coaching. It never has been. Not even when I was playing netball. I just want to be the athlete and do my job, and that's it. I actually, I don't even really understand my programming or
just follow it.
I just follow it. I know as much as my body, how I feel, and what I've learned from all the data I've collected over the years, but I really couldn't apply that to anybody else.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And an interesting aspect of it too that I found, because I've been going to the gym since I was 13, and then I did my personal training certificate, how old was I? 20 or something, and I wanted to turn my passion into a profession. But then you realise that the alignment there might not actually align very well. Although you're passionate about something for yourself, turning it into a profession, at least what I found going into full-time contracting personal training, some people are only seeing you out of obligation. They don't even like the gym, and that was a big wake up for me. But just from a big perspective, turning your passion into a profession, although you hear it so often, that sometimes it can take away that passion for it. And perhaps, say, for you turn up, you go to the gym for 3 or 4 hours, and then you leave. But then if you were to become a coach, then you might have to stay at the gym longer to coach an athlete, or you might have to go home and write plans. So all of a sudden that passion that you had is no longer just yours as well. You have to be in that space a lot longer. So yeah, it was an interesting learning for me.
Yeah, and I've seen people like pick up on that passion and really enjoy it. You know, obviously I see it with my coach. He really loves doing what he does. But yeah, I just can't relate. I can't relate. And I think, that's okay. But in a way, like, I think maybe too, it's just with my job is almost like coaching. So I'm constantly working with people and, giving them praise when something's better and talking them through their medications. And so I think, all of that passion goes into that type of almost coaching, and I just have nothing left. Nothing else left for anything else.
Yeah, and I could even, like, the vibes that I could get from you, it's obvious that you're a really caring person and you would give to people when they're needing it or wanting it. So that's an aspect of coaching that can really drain your energy too, when, especially if your athletes or your clients are having a tough time. I could imagine that you would be a person who would give everything to them, and then that would be another element that could detract from your own training or your own personal life, as that constant energy drain. It's definitely not easy. Some of the pretty high level athletes do coach people, and it's sort of like, oh wow, hats off to you, because for me to do what I do, I have to be selfish and not keep my energy to myself. And I think for the last thing I'd be interested to pick your brain about is the crossover between your competing life, and it could be your work life as well, but just competing to other areas of your life. In terms of the learnings that you've had along the way, have you applied any of those learnings to the other areas of your life as well? Or how does that relationship work between the different areas of your life and the lessons that you've learned?
I think I don't know if it came from my life into powerlifting or powerlifting into my life, but a big thing has been like the practice of mindfulness, and because with life and with training and also competing, there's so many different things that could be going on, and they can be negative and they could be really positive. There's some really high highs and some low lows in a competition, plus being surrounded by all of everybody else's energy. And so one big thing that I've used both in my life and in my competition is being mindful, seeing things like the arrows coming your way, and deciding whether they're just going to pass by or whether it's a helpful one and you're going to hold on to it and use it in some way to benefit me, and let go of the things that are not helpful. So I try. It's a lot harder to do in life.
What does being mindful mean to you? I can get the analogies, but what if you were to be mindful, what does that mean to you?
It just for me it means experiencing things, but knowing that I have a choice on how much I respond and how I want to respond. That's what it means to me, and that's been and will always be like a massive I think tool in my box. That's, I think, almost a special power, like being able to use that in competition. And it's as if you have the ability to step back and be the observer of the things that are going on at the time. Like you say, a really, you just won a big competition. It's like taking that step back, like celebrating it, but taking a step back and being like, okay, but we still need to work on this thing. Or if it was a negative thing, taking the step back and understanding, okay, what's a good response here? Is it for me to get really upset? Is it for me to get really angry? So
That is a
Yeah.
superpower, having that ability to separate yourself from that situation in the time.
Yeah, yeah, and that's probably like if someone asked me like how do you compete, I think that's how I compete. It doesn't make for interesting watch, but but it helps me.
Is that a skill that you've sort of learned or acquired, or is that something that you've always thought about? You know, where did it come from, do you think?
It probably came from like junior hospital years, I think, because of that. It was just so overwhelming.
Yeah.
So overwhelming. And you learn about mindfulness
Yeah.
at school, and they try to get you to practice it because they know
At
what's
school,
coming.
That stuff is so lame,
Yeah.
though. You're like, oh
It
yeah,
is.
whatever. Yeah,
I just fell asleep every time we did it. So
yeah.
they're like, try not to fall asleep.
It's even like goal setting as well at school, or when you're learning, like, yeah, whatever. And then it's
Yeah.
not until you're put into a situation where it's actually applicable that you understand its significance. So it sounds like at the time you didn't really think much of it, but then it became, you know, quite applicable in the years to come.
Yeah. And then I think it just kind of, like, my feedback always at the end of a run was like, you can always keep cool and calm. And I'm like, that's just been like a theme throughout my life. And it's been more helpful than I thought it would be with powerlifting.
Yeah, and I suppose it's a skill that you're going to be able to take into these big competitions. You know, how you're talking about earlier, what is it going to be like being around these big names? But if you have that ability to detach for a second and be an observer to that, it won't be able to affect you as much.
Yeah. And not to switch back on you, but actually I've just been wondering like what your thoughts are on sports psychology and like how helpful you think it might be for an athlete.
Oh, nice. Flip it back on me. Well, if in short, I'd say it's super beneficial, both from my undergraduate degree in psychology and learning a little bit of stuff in there. I have a bit of technical understanding of how it could be really beneficial. But then Chloe, before one of her big international competitions, she had the 2 sessions with a sports psychologist. After the first session, she was kind of like, oh, I don't know about this. All it was just heaps of questions. And then in the second session, all of those questions and the information that was gathered was produced some really helpful advice, including that in terms of your pie and what your identity encompasses, because that was applicable for her because the competing was such a significant part of that. So the advice there was to try and include some other elements in there. So if you do get injured or you can't compete anymore, your whole life doesn't crumble. But even in terms of being able to cope with the pressure, understand what it's like to compete at a high level, having some tools like that ability to detach from your emotions at the time, I think would be super beneficial. So, but I would say, like any service, there's going to be a good plumber and a bad plumber. So it depends on the psychologist that you go to. But if they're a sports psychologist, they would have years of study and years of practice. So there might be different, the disparity might not be as much. But in short, I would say it would definitely be very beneficial.
You can only gain. There's nothing to lose.
Yeah, exactly. And I think especially from going from national competitions to a massive international stage and having a tool set and being able to cope with that pressure would help you a lot. But like we talked about, you going into this first one, it's really good in a way that the expectations aren't super high. You didn't win it last year, so they're expecting you to win it again. But obviously to go, you have to be a really top tier athlete, but it's not that sense of pressure of, well, I'm a returning champ and I have to live up to this expectation again. So
Yeah, definitely. Just different, everyone will have different pressures.
Yeah.
And it is nice. Even there's a small niche of people who are putting pressure on me, which is good.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I won't have all that extra stuff to worry about. But yeah, I guess when people, it just seemed like a bandwagon that people were sort of jumping on, like, see a psychologist. And I just wasn't sure. I haven't really talked to anybody who's seen one. So thank you for
no, that's all right. And then, but another thing to consider too is that they can be super expensive. Like, it could be $400 for an hour or something like that, which there will be benefit, but I don't know. That's what at least Chloe found anyway. It was real expensive. I think it was like $700, $800 or something. But going into a big international competition where there is prize money, there is sponsorship, it's also an investment too. If you do it and you have the ability to perform at a high level, and then there's some kind of return, it
would be more expensive than normal counselling, do you think?
Yeah, definitely.
Because it's very niche.
And it's private. Yes, there's not a subsidy for a pro athlete wanting to go see a sports psychologist.
That's definitely on you.
Exactly. But there could be a return on investment there from being able to perform better. So it's something that I think you should at least contemplate. Maybe not for this one, but I mean, you could still get value from it and then have a tool set to take there and then be able to perform better. But that was a good question. Well, I really appreciated having you on today. Apologise again for all the weird technical difficulties. Who knew that motion sensors lights would be so annoying? For some reason, when we had two of us in here, they didn't turn off once. But they're on after hours lights, so I think they're on like a 1 hour timer. So I was anticipating it, but thank you for bearing with me.
No worries. Thank you for having me. It was such a cool chat.
Yeah, well, I just appreciate your insights. It's obvious that the strength training, not to start the conversation up again, but it's obvious that the strength training means so much more to you than just getting stronger. There's so many different elements to it, and that's what I want to advocate to people as well, is that they might see you lifting some heavy weights, but there's so much more depth to it, there's so many more wider implications to it, and so many more ways that it can positively benefit you and the people around you as well. And that's the whole point of these conversations, is just to empower other people to start on their own fitness journey as well. So
well said.
Hey, thanks. I wrote that down. No, I didn't actually. No, thanks heaps. I really appreciate it.
No worries.
Before we go, if people want to search you up and see how strong you are and follow your journey to Sheffields and Worlds, Instagram would probably be the best place to check you out, right?
Yeah, Instagram. I need to check. I forgot what my name was. I think Karlina 23.
Yeah, nice, cool. So check her out. I'd highly recommend it. Sweet. Thanks again.
Thanks, Cam.
All right, that's us. Nice.
Cool.
I do genuinely appreciate you bearing with me. I get so annoyed when technical difficulties happen, because it throws the flow off. You're like, okay, what were we talking about? We were talking about something good? Oh, shit, I can't remember.
All good. Yeah. I actually wrote down the times if you want them.
Oh, did you? Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So, what I normally do is that I might stop the recording too, so I don't have to cover all